There's no principle in some of our politics of the day. The second failure is a failure of what one can call loosely black parties to unite. The statistics are very grim. The statistics that are facing this country are very, very grim. You've got 40% unemployment. And I'm quite sure 99% of those 40% is black people. You've got 65% youth unemployment. You've got the highest inequality rate in the world, not just in the continent, in the whole world. In other words, you've got a concoction of things that are actually a time bomb. And what do? You enter into an agreement that makes you do nothing for the next 5 years, instead of entering into an agreement that can push the boundaries a little bit. We are now, you could always, I could couch the NC as a leader of compromise. But they were a leader of compromise in 1994 to get us over the Rubicon. But 30 years later, they've entered into another compromise that makes them do nothing for the next 5 years. And I'm being serious about the fact that they will be able to do very little. They won't be able to implement the NHI that they so want. So, yes, people can talk now about, oh, no, the rand is getting better and so on. But I don't know what they will say about yesterday's GDP figures. So it's just all propaganda. So they have to make themselves feel better as leaders. And that's not a mark of leadership. A mark of leadership is to be able to face a crisis and not waste it. And I think the ANC losing an election at 40, for me, was a wasted crisis, because there's this idea that if they partnered with the EFF and the MK, then there will be an Armageddon. I think that is completely a scaremongering thing, because those parties don't have 40%. It's the ANC that has 40%. Which means that once you partner with those, you have to everyone has to compromise and be able to come to the middle ground. But the middle ground that is progressive, that will reverse the kind of inequality that has made us, a poster boy of inequality in the world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, great leaders and great scholars, lovers of wisdom, creators of knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us again tonight. We are continuing with our weekly series, or weekly webinars, where we discuss leadership. My name is Mazwe Majola. I'm from the Worldwide Institute of Leadership and Development, an institute that is so passionate and compassionate about leadership development, because we have realized that leadership is everything, and everything is leadership. We've realized that great leaders should constantly develop themselves, because once you stop develop yourself as a leader, you'll become obsolete. So that is why we started this platform where we meet weekly every Wednesdays. We are joined here by academics from different universities, by executives from private sector and public sector, by politicians, members of the media, community leaders, religious leaders, professionals from all walks of life. We're just here to discuss leadership. It's a safe space. It's where leaders talk to other leaders. It's where leaders encourage other leaders, inspire other leaders, empower other leaders, admonish other leaders. Because as I always ask, who's going to do it? Who's going to correct us as leaders if we don't meet in this fashion and be frank with each other where we are not doing well and talk about it? Because it's us, only us. It's like we are in these four walls, us as leaders, and say, hey, man, let us just talk about ourselves. Let's talk about, are we still online with what we are doing? So every Wednesdays we meet here, we always have an opportunity of hosting or being addressed by powerful leaders. We're doing it every Wednesdays, and that is why so many people keep on coming weekly, which obviously I'm very humbled about that. It's like master classes that we have every Wednesdays, and just leaders just sit back, listen to each other. So much for joining us again. Let me welcome our regulars and our members. I always say that really these are men and women we learn from each other every week. And I'm so glad that we've got such powerful people in this platform that really we just learn with your wisdom and with your counsel. And we really appreciate that. A special welcome to those colleagues who are joining us for the first time. If you are here for the first time, special welcome to you. Please do participate, do feel at home. Don't be diffident, don't hold back, don't think it's my first time. I just want to listen to others. Would like to listen from you as well, because there's a very good reason why you are here. So as I've said earlier on, it's just it's a safe space. It's just a platform of leaders. So you are more than welcome to participate. I'm going to introduce our speaker. He will address us. And once he has addressed us, then we'll interact with him and with us as well. Because as you know, it's a conversation. So especially for those who are joining us for the first time, we'll wait for the speaker until he finishes. And then once he's done that, then you can interact or ask questions or express your observation, your comments. You can do that via the chat room, or you can raise your hand. There's a button there where you can raise your hand and express yourself. I'm so glad today, and I'm so humbled that we've got a brother of mine, a very busy person, and I'm so humbled that really he has respected us to avail himself, because I know his schedule wouldn't really allow him to be here. But and I would like to thank him for his humility, and also just to show that, look, I mean, let me come and meet and mingle and meet with other scholars and leaders and hear what they are saying. And we are discussing a very interesting topic tonight. It's 2024 Watershed Year. Yeah. Especially in South Africa, but in other areas as well. We just heard that Namibia has elected a first woman president, and we really congratulate Namibia for that. And we hope that other SADC countries will follow, will emulate what Namibia has just done. Yeah, watershed, yeah, in South Africa. But so what will be the leadership lessons, not only for now, but for the past and also for the future? And we are being addressed by, as I've said, my brother, Professor JJ Tabane. Many of you know him. I don't think there is anyone who's here tonight who don't know him or who doesn't know that name. So we are so happy that he has joined us tonight. Let me just read his brief bio. I won't read everything, but just a little bit about him, then he will then address us. So Professor JJ Tabane is a professor of communications at the UNISA School of Business Leadership and adjunct professor of media studies at the University of Botswana. He's the editor of Leadership and BBQ magazines and anchor of the award-winning Power to Truth with Professor JJ Tabane, which is takes place at ENCA TV. Tabane started crafting his skills in strategic communication since 1989, when at only 25 became a ministerial spokesperson of the then Department of Constitutional and Development under former Minister Mohamed Vali Musa. In 2002, he was selected the inaugural joint winner of the Government Communicator of the Year. Since then, he has held roles as communications advisor for the then Chamber of Mines, communications advisor of the African Development Bank for the APRM, that is AU's governance advisory body, representing 40 countries, vice president of communications for the South African Airways in 2006, consultant to Brand South Africa and Water Research Commission, convener of the National Communications Task Team, first Chief Information Officer of the Congress of People, and also CEO of an investor relations company, Graphico P2 Ltd, a subsidy of JSE listed Adcock, and as Group Executive Corporate Affairs with a mandate to drive a 5-year transformation strategy. He has served and also still serves on the boards of the multi-billion JSE listed company like Altron, PowerTech, and UWC Foundation, chairperson of the UWC Media Society, chair finance at UWC and transformation at Northwest University, and as a council member of the Northwest University and UWC. UWC is University of Western Cape. He holds a BA degree from University of Limpopo, a BProc degree from University of Western Cape, a master's degree in political economy from Nelson Mandela University, and a PhD in media studies from Wits University, and completed leadership programs at Wits Business School and UCT Business School. A thought leader and a sought-after speaker. He is author of Let's Talk Frankly, Letters to Influential South Africans on the State of Our Nation, and a biography of Major Madisa Mfeka, Yes, I Am a Pilot. Has penned more than 300 opinion pieces since 2006 for the City Press newspaper, Huffington Post, the Mail and Guardian, Daily Maverick, the Star, and the Sunday Times, and hosted frank dialogue on Ubuntu Radio, Power Perspectives on Power FM, Frankly Speaking on SABC3, Your View on Newsroom Africa, and Power to Truth on ENCA. And of course, as I've said, editor of Leadership Magazine. He delivers sessional lectures in African Media Studies for honors class, media and politicals honors class, and government communications course at Wits Business School, and communication master class series stages at the University of Botswana. In 2010, he was admitted as an associate of the prestigious Institute of International Business. That is Professor JJ Tabane, ladies and gentlemen. Can we allow him to address us? And as he does that, can you please make sure that you mute, please make sure that you double check. The only person who must be unmuted now is the speaker, and everyone must be muted. And then once he has spoken, we'll then ask questions and engage him. As we always ask, those people will be talking. Please, if you can show your video so that we can see you, and also we can see your lips and your eyes. Thank you. Prof, my brother, once again, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to this platform, and we are ready to hear from you. You can now address us, my dear brother. Thank you, sir.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much for inviting me, Prof, to this wonderful platform, and congratulations for setting up something of this nature, because I believe that the biggest problem we have in the whole continent is really the issue of servant leadership, because all the other problems we have are as a result of a weakness around issues of leadership. A friend of mine, Tebe Kalafin, who just released a book, Traversing the Continent, was talking to him on my show a few weeks ago, and says that Africa is not poor at all, but it is poorly led, and I think that shows you that we need to do more in terms of scholarly work around leadership and just work in society about encouraging people to embrace servant leadership, because I think for me that is what is largely missing. I thought I would reflect on 2024 in terms of the lessons we can take from 2024 and as far as leadership is concerned. One can say been an instructive year in terms of leadership. First of all, let's look at the issue of 30 years of democracy. That's how we kicked off the year. There was a lot of reflection on 30 years of democracy. Yes, unfortunately, that reflection of 30 years of democracy was drowned out by the fact that it was an election year. So whatever reflection you made before May, around 30 years, was always seen through the prism of politics. If you say there was poor leadership, so you are now you are seen as criticizing the ANC, and so there was a battle of narratives about how we should be reflecting on things. Where was the failure of leadership? And often, in academia, we are taught to look at evidence-based opinion, which could be an oxymoron, but your opinion has to be based on something that, as an academic or an intellectual reflecting, you got to be able to say, I based this opinion on the following evidence. What is the evidence that's in front of us? The evidence in front of us is 0% economic growth. If you say 0.1, to make it better, 0.2, or whatever it is in the zeros over the last 10 years. And for me, that is a failure of leadership, not just in government, but also in the private sector. How can we have a private sector that is renowned all over the world? Our banks we're told are the most sophisticated in the world. They win awards about wonderful systems they have, and so on. And we've got companies here that are multinationals, that are South African companies that are found around the world. So we've got a very solid private sector. But between that private sector and a government that one could describe as weak in as far as creating an environment of economic growth, between those two, we still have zero economic growth. And we need to ask ourselves, where is the failure of leadership on either side? Let me start with the private sector. If you read the annual reports of various public sector companies over the last 30 years, and you don't even have to read all 30 reports, you just have to take a sample of about 5 or 6, you'll realize that it's not a myth that companies are sitting on piles of cash and are slowing down on their own investments, right? Because they are saying, oh, the political environment is not too stable, and so we're not going to invest so we can keep our money, because our money we can transfer in 2 minutes offshore if we build a factory here, and so we can't carry that factory away. So there is that attitude. I know some business leaders would reject that, but they need to reject it in the context of their own companies, not in general terms. Because in general terms, we're reading annual reports, which are published for a reason. And we can see there that these companies are making a lot of money, which they are not reinvesting by and large. And unfortunately, that is the message that they are sending to international investors, because international investors take local investors. If the local investors are not leading in investing locally, the international investors are going to say there must be something wrong there. Why are the people who are from there not investing? So there's a key thing about if you like, poverty or poor leadership in as far as, repositioning our country as an investment destination by the private sector. We're coming to government late. I want to deal with the private sector a little bit. The Competition Commission has shown us that there's a lot to be said about how private sector itself has to be put under scrutiny, so that you don't have, a Tiger Brands and those kind of companies colluding to increase the price of bread, or Pick n Pay and Boxer and this camp colluding to inflate the prices of masks. So there is an issue there where the private sector seems to be too inwardly focused and not looking at the broader picture by and large. And again, these are generalizations, right? But we have to generalize in order to dissect what the problem is. Not all business leaders would think that it's not important, for example, to implement transformation in their companies. But again, the facts tell us a grim story of the private sector. A report released by the Department of Labor, which was a report followed up as a follow-up to a report released by KPMG in 2009. Same story about poverty of transformation in the high echelons of the private sector. That report says that despite affirmative action, despite employment equity legislation, as of the development of that report, which is not old, I think that the report is 2 years old, right? That report says 70% of all new appointments and all new promotions in the private sector, 70% are to white people. This is an indictment on the private sector. If you are looking at 30 years overall and how we have moved from saying this is a new South Africa to 30 years on, and we're still talking about affirmative action to transform. So that's in the private sector. I can go on, but we don't have to belabor the point. The point is failure of leadership exists also in the private sector and needs to be attended to. And then on the government side, there's been a failure to create an environment which will see business thrive. And that is a serious indictment on behalf of government. We've just seen, and I don't want to talk about big macroeconomic concepts because I'm not an economist. I'm just going to tell you that we have had stories where big companies, and there was a company called Clover that was investing somewhere in Klerksdorp. They left because there was no water provision. The streets were in a horrendous state for them to transport their merchandise. Electricity was always off, unscheduled maintenance, or unscheduled about load shedding in the city where you go to an app, Escom's a push, and you know when your load shedding is going to happen. I'm talking about where it just switches off. You are in the middle of production. They had to leave and say, would rather go to KZN, right? I don't have to give many examples of that, of companies that just packed and just left, right? And mining companies that left desolate mines because they couldn't take it anymore in terms of whatever their gripes were about laws, labor laws, and whatever else. So that environment has become, in a sense, toxic for the economy. And then you've got corruption. That corruption, of course, is also in the private sector, but in government has been more pronounced, with close to R1 trillion over the 30 years. That shows again poor leadership in terms of clamping down, because corruption has a human element, and so human beings in exercising leadership must clamp down. What you found now is a culture of corruption where you can accept corruption in every transaction. Anything that is just below above million rand, you must know somebody was paid, right? And there you've got there is a conspiracy between public and private sector of a failure of leadership in this particular area. South Africa is now number 75 or 78 in the rankings of corruption. And part of that score is because we have failed when it comes to exercising leadership on corruption. And the examples are many. I want us to have a conversation about how we sort them out, not use today to lament everything. But it's important to say what runs a country to put together a state capture report. Various names of people I mentioned there, not a single one of them is in prison. Not a single one has been convicted. If anything, the cases that have been brought before the courts have been cocked up by the NPA that is receiving a free pass from all of us as leaders, from the media, from everybody. And they have sat there for 5 years and they can't tell us a clear example of that they have said for people to stop corruption. If anything, it looks like corruption is getting worse. And that again, you got to just look at the evidence. The Auditor General every year, just last week, I think the latest report was last week, talking about 100 billion rand being wasted. Every year they come with horror stories, horror numbers. Again, even there, just to tell us that the previous Auditor General went to Parliament and said, guys, there's a lot of wastage. They were given those powers. I'm yet to hear that there's a single person or mayors or whoever who are pointed the finger at by the Auditor General who is actually being prosecuted. If anything, in this 30 years, there's been many, many examples, even before the state capture, of a situation where people just simply get away with murder when it comes to corruption. In 2009, a report was given to SCOPA that contained no less than 2,000 names of state officials who did business with themselves. These people are leaders in their different government departments like DGs and chief directors and give those companies business. This is the culture of corruption that is so rooted, and unfortunately it's widespread. It's not just here, it's everywhere in the continent at different levels of it. So when we reflect on the 30 years, then those are the things that are looking us in the face. Of course, there are successes. It's a question of looking at whether the glass is half full or half empty. And anybody who says things like exactly as they were in 1994, obviously won't be telling the truth. We've got almost 100% electrification, even though there were years where we didn't have that electricity. We've got people who have access to municipal water, sanitation, things that we take for granted today, but just 30 odd years ago, there were various communities that didn't have access to those things. There were people who didn't have a shelter over their heads. Today, we've got millions of people who don't have to pay for their housing. The issue is not that something was done. The issue is that we got to set our standards of leadership much higher than they are right now. Because if you simply look on the surface that they delivered the following things, the 2 million people have houses, you will miss the point. Because the point is whether or not there is a culture of service and therefore servant leadership as those things were being delivered, or were those things used as a facade for corruption, amongst other things. So that's in terms of reflection of 30 years. We can take some lessons from there to say our policies are fantastic. Our constitution is well renowned, legislation brilliant. And I think if there was a competition in the world about writing laws, we would win that competition hands down as South Africa. But we'll score 0 when it comes to implementation. And for me, that's a big takeaway from the 30 years. We got to appoint the right people in the right jobs. It had become obvious, or rather, it has become, something that we've taken for granted in the 30 years, that if you are not a card-carrying member of the ruling party, you are unlikely to get a job that you deserve. And for me, that's failure of leadership. I cannot believe that we've had a situation where ADA has to go to court to force us to do the right thing, which is simply even to look amongst our own selves. There are people who are capable, but they just happen to be in the wrong faction. And we don't appoint those people, and we would rather appoint somebody who is clueless. I mean, if you look at the province like the Free State and Northwest, go and look at who are the municipal managers. It's a crying shame, and it shows in the numbers. There's not been a single clean audit in those places because they decided to appoint their friends, right? And this is a big failure of leadership, because if you are a leader, you have to surround yourself with people who are better than you. And I think that's a big takeaway from the 30 years. The second part, obviously, is the fact that we're not a hopeless state. We're not a hopeless nation when it comes to leadership. There are people who are daring amongst us. And the elections tells you that, because there were over 21 parties, right, that all had leaders who thought, I can be president of this country. Obviously, the electorate had a different view at the polls, but the fact that people thought we have to take it in our own hands to solve the problems of our country and not check out, for me, that is a big lesson for us that says there is still hope here. And maybe the GNU gives an opportunity for some of those people who would never be president in their lives to be something that where they implement something and stop talking in the opposition benches. So in a sense, the whole hype about these elections being another 1994, for me, is a big leadership lesson that says we can't give up, despite all the things that I've said about what's going wrong in terms of failure of leadership. It's clear that there are lots of people who thought, we can't give up, and these people formed parties. Some of them were even independent. Of course, the electorate showed us that we're not ready for that chapter, because not even a single one of them made it to parliament. And all they needed was 50,000 votes. So they couldn't convince 50,000 people to vote for them in a country of 27 million voters, or whatever it is, that number. But the bottom line there is people decided we're going to exercise our agency. Of course, then the elections came, milestone, another big milestone. And it showed, I mean, there's a phrase in English that says your sleep is showing. Our sleep as politicians, in this case, showed big time here. First of all, the so-called moonshot was a terrible failure. And we could have predicted that as they formed that. Not always a good idea to form a coalition ahead of an election, because you are assuming the support that you may not even have. But that's not why it failed. I think it failed because it was premised on hatred rather than affinity. So EFF is an enemy. Let's all gather together. ANC must get out. That is a very negative message, and the electorate rejected that. But the leaders could not stick with their principles. In 2 minutes after the elections were announced, the moonshot collapsed. They could have stuck together and went to the opposition benches. They didn't do that. They wanted to go where there is power, because suddenly their moonshot, was only going to happen in the moon, I suppose. So that was a failure of leadership, and also the slip showing there that there's no principle in some of our politics of the day. The second failure is a failure of what one can call loosely black parties to unite. The statistics are very grim. The statistics that are facing this country are very, very grim. You've got 40% unemployment. And I'm quite sure 99% of those 40% is black people. You've got 65% youth unemployment. You've got the highest inequality rate in the world, not just in the continent, in the whole world. In other words, you've got a concoction of things that are actually a time bomb. And what do? You enter into an agreement that makes you do nothing for the next 5 years, instead of entering into an agreement that can push the boundaries a little bit. We are now, you could always, I could couch the NC as a leader of compromise. But they were a leader of compromise in 1994 to get us over the Rubicon. But 30 years later, they've entered into another compromise that makes them do nothing for the next 5 years. And I'm being serious about the fact that they will be able to do very little. They won't be able to implement the NHI that they so want. They so want desperately that they passed it before the elections. They won't be able to implement their Bella Act. They're being, sidestep. And 30, there are a number of things. I can't go through the whole chapter and verse, but there's clear deadlock things that, interestingly, those things were not made a condition of the GNU. Let's be clear that the DA did not demand the NC to change any of its policies. They didn't make the NHI the deal breaker, because then there will be no GNU. Because they've told us that the NHI is a red line for them. They're going to court, they're going to make it not happen. Bella Act, as you can see, marches, orange marches to Fort Tracker Monument, you name it. There's a rebellion around it. BE, interestingly, the DA wanted that ministry, but we know why they wanted it, in order to stop BE. They're in court on employment equity. So we're going to spend the next 5 years arguing within the cabinet instead of improving our people's lives. And I'm not being a dooms prophecy. I'm just saying that I question the leadership that thought the GNU is the best way out of these statistics I'm talking about. Because that government is not telling me how it's going to reverse unemployment, how it's going to ensure that there's universal health care, how it's going to make sure that our education system is, prepares our kids for an economy that is rough. So yes, people can talk now about, oh no, the rent is getting better and so on, but I don't know what they will say about yesterday's GDP figures. So it's just all propaganda. So they have to make themselves feel better as leaders, and that's not a mark of leadership. A mark of leadership is to be able to face a crisis and not waste it. And I think the ANC losing an election at 40, for me, was a wasted crisis, because there's this idea that if they partnered with the EFF and the MK, then there will be an Armageddon. I think that is completely a scaremongering thing, because those parties don't have 40%. It's the ANC that has 40%. Which means that once you partner with those, you have to everyone has to compromise and be able to come to the middle ground. But the middle ground that is progressive, that will reverse the kind of inequality that has made us, a poster boy of inequality in the world. So for me, there is a sense in which, there was a misstep of leadership. But leadership is also about recovering. So one hopes, in terms of lessons for the future, that we are sitting with the GNU now, we've got to all see how we make it work. What can business do to make this arrangement work? Because it looks like that was their favorite way out. I've just been talking to some a gathering of some banks who were saying that they were extremely nervous of an EFF-ANC coalition, and although they don't particularly like the DA, they thought at least the DA will keep the ANC where it is, and that it doesn't go too left and no too right. This is what's happening in the corridors of business. Business is worried about the politics of the day for their own interest. So they're saying, oh, the status quo is better. Yes, better for who? The status quo is better. So they just say that we can get on with our lives. Yes, but not for 60% of the youth who are unemployed. That's a time bomb that's waiting to happen. Not for 40% of unemployed people. Not for the economy that's not growing, that's growing at zero. And as early as 3 months, the first 100 days, the World Bank has already revised our growth paths. So for me, I think there is an issue here about how we take the country forward. We've got the GNU, there's nothing we can do about it now. We can't unscramble that egg. And it will require leaders from across society. There are a few suggestions that one can look at in terms of leadership. Firstly, for every bad situation, there's a silver lining. Maybe the issues of corruption may just be lesser now because people are watching each other in cabinet and they don't have a blank check. If you're in student politics, you would know each time SASCO won 100%, there was a chaos of how resources were used. But if they just introduce 3 people from the opposition, suddenly you got a level of caution. And that may just be the only silver lining, but you can't build a country on the basis of fear. The second thing is the social compact, which we have failed to put together, another failure of leadership over the last 30 years. I think this social compact thing was mooted maybe 15 years ago. I think 2 years ago, the president in a State of the Nation said this social compact is going to be there in the first 100 days. I think it's more than 100 days after the State of the Nation, and we don't even have a decent draft. Yet that is where we need to be able to bring all sectors of society, leaders from across, from academia, from civil society, from business to come together. I'm not even going to touch civil society and its failure of leadership over the 30 years where they just decided, oh, our comrades are now in power, and then they left them to ruin things. And then they woke up late to realize that, hey, we left everything too much to these guys. But that's also part, because you can't build a country just based on hardcore economics. You've got to also look at the moral fiber, because that tends to influence how resources are spent, how resources are prioritized for the sake of our people. So that's my reflections on 2020. Milestone year, 30-year reflection, an election that came as unintended consequences or outcomes that nobody could predict quite fully. And then the aftermath of that election, all of those provide some key seminal lessons of leadership, of the path that we have traversed, but also gives us some challenges we can go. And so despite 7 leadership going into the continent, that's last that was going to happen in Namibia, but I don't want to enter into Namibian politics. At least they've elected a woman leader. But the idea was that SWAPO is tired. He's been there for 30 years and he's also tired. Frelimo in Mozambique is refusing to get out of power. It's a terrible idea. So Botswana and Mauritius at least led the way to say part of leadership is also knowing when to quit. And it doesn't look like it's a habit of our leaders across the continent. They have to be chased out before they can see that they have overstayed their welcome. So that's also part of the leadership. I'm glad to see some new trends, and one will be looking at Botswana to see how it can lead the way, even in terms of dealing with the country's minerals. This continent is wealthy, but we have managed to be robbed of our minerals by external forces, and because of the kind of forces, and then neglect their own people, even where their minerals, those countries are minerals rich, in more ways than one. I'll stop there, Prof, for engagement. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Prof. Thank you very much. I didn't want to disturb you while you was talking. If it's possible, just to lift up your head a little bit. I don't know whether you may want to adjust your seat where you're sitting or your computer just a little bit again, if it's possible. You just want to see you. Otherwise, it seems like you're in a hole there or somewhere. But much better, much better, much better now. Thanks, my brother. Thank you so much. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for those insightful and thought-provoking and instructive and informative message there. Thanks, Prof. But my platform knows that I always don't want to rob them, because I've got people who are very busy here who live to very important things to attend here. I always like to give them time when they're here to engage the prof. So, ladies and gentlemen, now it's the time to engage Professor JJ. I see a very long message there for Nsapo. Nsapo, I would like you, if you can just express yourself, my sister, if you can just say whatever you want to say. We want to hear you. But maybe just before Nsapo comes and others still coming, what do you make of the yesterday's announcement, Prof? The president is swapping the Minister of Justice to Human Settlement, and from the other one, in other words, really the president failing
The
to
reshuffle.
fire the minister,
Yeah.
the reshuffle, instead just to those just swapping there and playing some chairs there, or musical chairs. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah. No, we shouldn't be. No, we shouldn't be surprised at all. It's a full-on trend by our president. Our president has not fired anybody. I think the last person he fired after a year of dilly-dallying was Lindiwe Sisulu, right? And he didn't fire her for incompetence, fired her for politics, right? But he has never fired anyone. You understand? So I don't know why we expected that he was going to fire Silani. I've been surprised he's shuffled. I mean, that's a massive step forward, because he actually would have done nothing, and it would not even be a surprise. Uh, um, the Minister of Justice should have been fired, because the president appoints his cabinet, right? They serve at his pleasure. But because he has never been able to send a strong message, right, where corruption is concerned, it would be a brand new thing if he actually fired them. So he has to balance interest, think about himself in the party and his allies and what. And I think that's been a wrong way of how leadership has been approached in this country. But forget about Simelane. What about the 98 people in the state capture report, some of whom are in the top 7 of the ANC? You wonder, are these people, when they are sitting together as leaders, ask each other, hey man, aren't you taking this report on review? What's happening? And you wonder about that. The reality is he has not lifted a finger. I don't know whether you remember, when the report was 6 months old, the president called a press conference where he came to instruct all and sundry what to do. He said that this agency must do this, NPM must do that, but doesn't say what he's going to do, either through the NEC or through his cabinet. He didn't act at all, not even to reprimand them. At least Zuma last, when the public protector said he must reprimand some minister, he wrote a letter to say, I reprimand you, He did something to try and to send a strong message on corruption, and it's quite sad. I mean, what happened yesterday is truly bad for his reputation. But once again, I'm not surprised because it's a trend. That's what he has made us get used to. He has never fired any serious person for incompetence, despite things falling apart around. I mean, you remember the Minister of Post promotes you to be the second most powerful person in the country. They move her from defense minister to be a speaker of parliament, despite the cloud that was hanging. By the way, the allegations for which she's been arrested are not new. They were there even when the president, before she appointed her, about these VBS stories. So I'm sorry, we're swimming in a terrible mess where it comes to leadership at the top. And I know that we're not president, so we don't know what's going on in his head and what interests he has to balance. But from afar, it looks bad.
Thank you. Absolutely, that was so laughable. What we heard or what we saw last night. It was ludicrous, really. I see a head there from Siswezi. Siswezi, over to you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And thank you very much, Prof. JJ. And good evening to the rest of the colleagues that are available on the platform. Prof. JJ and the whole house. My observation about Africa, and also mainly South Africa, because we live in it, we have got many of our problems which repeat themselves, because we have gotten to a point where the populace resembles leaders. And a lot of our fellow South Africans would be no different if given a chance to be in power, mainly because this DNA of wanting to be there, has now been passed down to even new generations. Now we have got a large number of people who are being recycled with terrible histories, like you have mentioned, and some of them are the new young co-opted ones. Now they actually go and join the old who are currently in power, and they make a very strong block. Now, I don't want to be long, but I want to believe that there's these lots are quite a few, compared to the silent majority that the country has got, that needs just to stand out for the better future of South Africa. I'm just saying, you are in the communication space, and there are many who we know of your ilk, Prof, that are in the communication space. I want to believe that you have actually read how the now Botswana got to where it is now. You have read how Paul Traore have gotten to where they are. Your Bukeles from El Salvador, your Milei from Argentina, even if there are flaws in the things that which they have implemented, but there can be lessons learned by the willing South Africa who wants to change South Africa for the better. Now, my plea to yourselves as comms people, and I know that you are powerful, but to actually congregate and actually say, this is going to be the most impactful way that will get into the conscience of leaders, to say that we have failed and failed. Now we want to pass on to other people, or let's accept that we are defeated, or to say that the masses, this is how you can actually change government, because it has happened. I mean, we had the Kenyan youth forcing the government to change policy direction which they had already decided upon. So I feel very strongly that instead of lamenting all of us, let's have those voices, especially those who are in the profession like yourselves, because the issue is communication. The masses need communication. Those that are a silent majority need to be woken up to actually say, it is up to us. Otherwise, we don't have any other South Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Siswezi. Over to you, Professor JJ, and then we'll come back. I see Dr. Sipe Potelo's got a question there, and then we'll take Dr. Potelo. Over to you, Prof.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that sentiment. In fact, early this year, I gave a lecture at the University of Botswana, which was my inaugural lecture there, talking about telling the African story anew. How can we tell a new story? Because there is a new story that's emerging. If you look at Botswana, and I'm not overpraising Botswana because I don't want them to disappoint me, after 5 years. But if you look at Botswana, we're telling that story anew. We're saying, if you look at South Africa, how they have dealt with the minerals. I was making this example the other day that in 2003, when the then Minister of Minerals, Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, released the mining charter, it was suggesting that 50% of the minerals must go to black people, to South Africans. And there was 50 billion rand of capital flight just from that leaked document before it was even made law. Right? Fast forward, if you look at Botswana, the bears did not run away. They have to sit down and negotiate to say that deal that you had previously is a bad deal. So we need to change that. So we're not just talking about changing the story from a point of view of repositioning it via communications and media, which I think must happen. There's no reason why, for example, our story is told by Al Jazeera and CNN. Where's the African voice? So I agree with you completely, and that's something that I'm definitely working on, and I'm pulling together people from different countries. Just been to Zambia now, with a new president there, who is focusing on getting even his own ministers to communicate. Very many heads of states don't care. He was there. We were doing a training for the cabinet, and he arrived to talk to them about, but why are you not communicating the successes of the government? Because part of that poor communication strategy is what ends up making the African story all about coups and wars and all the bad things, when the good things are there, but they are not being given oxygen by anybody. So thank you for that challenge, but I'm definitely on top of it already. And if I have it my way, before I exit this earth, there will be a CNN of Africa, if whatever it will be called. But we can't have CNN telling a story in 30 minutes for 50 countries. This has to stop, because inevitably they'll focus only on the negative things or half-baked things. They send correspondents who don't have a clue about the context of Africa to report about us. So I think that it's one element, but the bigger element is for the leaders to change their ways. Because if we try to put a lipstick on a pig, you know what's going to happen. They've got to change their ways. Then we'll have a good story to tell.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sipe Potelo. Over to you, my brother. And then I see some questions there from Moses Riboni, and then we'll come back to her after Dr. Potelo. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much to Professor JJ. I think my colleague there on the chart, the second question about issue of minerals, how to protect it, it goes to what is happening currently in the mines of the illegal mining. Then my question is, and come to Siskoza to say, are we having leaders in government, or are we having populists or we are having political figures masquerading as leaders of governance and administration. I'm not sure you get it. They are political masquerading, serving interest of politics, not serving interest of non-partisans. Because if those ministers, one, I would like to cite the issue of children dying today, then you ask yourself, what happened to the Minister of Health? Where are the laws of inspectors revisiting time and again to the stores, butcher shops? Are we supposed to acknowledge the apartheid government where the inspectors were visible to our communities to make the compliance of consumers? What happened? Are we having the government that pay jackets in offices, people that are not visible on the foot to make it a point that all stores or shops comply with the national inspection? The Minister of Health is silent. President was silent for too long. Children, the future leaders of South Africa, were dying until he got the pressure of the community to say children are dying. President, say something. I'm saying now, I'm asking to the Prof, do we still have the Minister of Health? I'm coming to the issue of mines and minerals. Do we still have the Minister of Minerals? Now we have got police cross-crossing in terms of dealing with the mines that were left abandoned. But we can see there is still a fruit within these mines, but people are losing jobs. I like that Prof is talking about the issue of private sectors. Why can't we outsource if those mines are still having something to develop this country? Why are we leaving those mines abandoned? Let's move away from mines. Go to the quarries in our communities in rural areas. It's a disgrace that the construction companies that are doing construction of roads, they opened quarries on the mountains and left those quarries open. Tomorrow, children go there and swim on those dams and get to be dying on those ones. What is our bylaws in terms of the minerals of this country? Are we having lawless country or leaderless country? I so wish that Prof can bite on those current ones. And also the last one of the Bella bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really like what you've said. You've taken the words out of my mouth. The other day I spoke about this on my show, basically saying that we don't have a leadership in the minerals arena. And I was not just talking about the issue of illegal mines. I was talking about a range of things which we don't have time to explore tonight. But if you look at quickly the issue of mine safety, you've got 3 miners who are stuck in the bottom of a mine for more than, I think they said 2,500 days. Okay. And I understand that to dig them out, you need about 100 million rand. So you're telling me that the Department of Minerals doesn't have 100 million rand or cannot mobilize 100 million rand. You're telling me that the Chamber of Mines, they are called now the Minerals Council. They used to be called the Chamber when I worked there. Those are multi-billionaires sitting around the table. They can actually pay for that operation from their own pockets. There's a CEO here of Sibanye Gold who earned 300 million just last year. He can take from that, he won't even feel the pinch. But it shows you there's no political will, both from business and from government. So in that sector, there's no leadership. I don't know what has happened to the mining charter. I doubt that anybody else has been talking about it for months. I've never had a leader talking about the mining charter. There's a licensing regime in this country for mines. And that licensing regime requires mines to close their mines properly when they finish. And then rehabilitate the communities within which they were mining. It's in the law and it's part of the license conditions. They actually have to set aside money to do that. There are over 6,000 desolate, abandoned mines in South Africa. 6,000. So what is the minister doing every day when he wakes up? Maybe you would say maybe he's busy with the new mines because these ones that are desolate are old mines. Well, even in the new mines, he's failing. Just last year alone, there were 2,500 mining licenses in his inbox, which have not been approved. No, if I say they have not been approved, it's a charitable explanation. They have not been considered. Because if you consider, those people get an answer to say yes or no. But if I've submitted and it's now 2 years, nobody's talking to me, what does that mean? Yeah, well, that ended minister a second term. But there's no leadership. Finally, on the issue of the illegal mining, when I worked for the chamber in 2003, there was a discussion paper about what you call artisanal mining. I don't know what happened to that paper. It's years later. This government hasn't passed a framework or a law that allows, a safe environment for artisanal mining to happen. These mines, the fact that we've got thousands of people underground, it means that they have left those deposits lying fallow there that could be otherwise used to improve people's lives, but that's happening in an unsafe environment where people are dying there with methane and what have you. So I can go on and on. On minerals, you got to simply cry about the fact that here is our biggest resource that is being mismanaged thoroughly, and by no less a person, but the Minister of Minerals, who happens to be the chairperson of the ANC. So I don't know what hope there is. The second thing, in terms of the health minister, I only have one comment. So I had a discussion with the minister, and my simple question was, the kids who died now, these are not the first set of kids to die of this poison. A year ago, literally last October, in the same community, children died, and the government doesn't know what killed those children. I mean, it's ridiculous. Forget about the ones who died now are dying every day. The ones who died a year ago, there is no closure for those families. The minister could not tell me what killed those kids. Forget about the ones who are currently now, because the report has just come out and they're trying to be clever by telling us this chemical, that chemical. What about those ones who died last year? In other words, if they did their jobs last year, they would have avoided these current deaths. Talk about the failure of leadership. And yes, you're talking about some, a very exuberant, likable minister. You're not talking about somebody who's rude and whatever. But he couldn't answer. Why don't you know what killed the people in the first place in October last year? Why couldn't you do that? Anyway, that's my comment. It just a deadlock of the GNU, and it shows who is running the show in the GNU, because how do you suspend clauses? The law doesn't even allow you to do that. You suspend 2 clauses because people have marched. It's a PR exercise, because in any event, he can't change those clauses before he goes back to Parliament, which may be another 3 years of a process. That's what I was saying to you. For me, the GNU looks like it's like an inertia for the next 5 years. That's what we're headed for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sis Riboni, over to you. And I see we'll take Simphiwe Mngadi after Riboni, and then Dr. Thandiwe Gama. Over to you, Riboni.
Thank you so much, Prof. I'm not sure if my line is very audible. My background is not the best. But thank you so much, Prof JJ. What a thought-provoking reflection there. So my question was just around us as the leadership, the first one, as the citizens rather, to say we often talk about the power we possess as citizens, but we never really see that, translate into reality. So my question was just around, because we always, find ourselves being the victims of poor leadership. Are there any, systems or any, any innovative ideas that we can come up with that will really educate the citizens about this power that we possess, and how do we really hold these leaders that we elect in power accountable? Because I feel like they just do what they do, knowing that there isn't much that we can do, as citizens. And then the second one, I think you have answered it, because it was just around, the minerals in Africa generally. There've been talks about, beneficiation, but we never really see any advancement on those discussions. So, but I think you really answered, a portion of it. So thank you so much. I would really like to know if there's something we can do beyond, casting our votes as cities, because we do have the power.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I like that, because part of what has put us where we are as a country is a lack of leadership from the ground. In other words, lack of leadership from ourselves. And there's always this phrase that says, you are the leaders you are waiting for. Right? And that's why I liked very much the fact that we had independents who stood and said, we're not going to be sheep and only go to political parties. I can also just go as a person and go and represent people in parliament. But of course, you have seen that the citizens didn't respond too well to that, which is a pity. And I hope that it's something that, because it's in the law, can still be given a chance, even at local level. I think that's where it often happens more pointedly. So the citizens have the power. And they have the power in various ways. You as an individual, all the people who are gathered here tonight are very powerful people who have studied, who are exposed, who are networked. But we have a culture where activism has died. And I worked for a big corporate, which will remain nameless. I arrived there and there was no black person on the exco. This is a 21 billion rand company. And when I scratched, I found all the subsidiaries. And there's a dot of a black person there, a dot of a black person somewhere else. And this company didn't see anything wrong with that. But the reality then is that those few black people who are there are stuck between being activists, telling these people you have to change. They didn't need me to arrive there and say, but how can you be so lily white? And I remember sitting in a board meeting after a month of being there, saying to them, "You look so white. If you look like this in 5 years, you'll be out of business." Well, I thought at that point that government was going to be so serious that the companies will have to run. What am I getting at? I'm getting at the fact that even people who then rise up their ranks and find themselves in the listed company as MD or group executive, there's this black job of group executive corporate affairs where you don't have a power, but you can make noise. They can't stop you talking, but they don't give you a budget and so on. But activism has died, because if they fire you, you're thinking, oh, my kids are going to private school. What am I going to do? So there is a limitation on activism, but we shouldn't be giving up. Those who have crossed the Rubicon. When I was I have the misfortune of starting a political party. People told me, but the people who are with have farms and wine farms and what? What do you have? You must close the gap between your activism and your bond. So even at that point, people are saying you are crazy to put your life on the line and so that activism has died, and that's where we need to revive it. And I don't think it's impossible to revive it. We just don't have the time to go through all the mechanisms. But for example, I'm hosting a summit of all these corporate social investment practitioners I think it's in February, right? To come and talk about how we support each other. Because the job of transformation in corporate is a very isolated job. It's a very lonely job. You are alone there. You don't even have a team. When you try to talk to the people, they say, hey, no, we don't want to. You're going to get us into trouble and so on. I saw this a couple of years ago. I tried to host a program on my show where I invited corporate affairs executives to come and talk to me about transformation. We invited about 30 of these or 30 or executives, we only had one response, which was positive. The others said, no, we're afraid we'll lose our jobs. Now, if you are in that position and you're afraid to lose your job over transformation, that's where the problem starts. That's the first thing. Secondly, we all have agency. And it doesn't help us to have a seminar and talk about agency. You got to see in your area. I can tell you now, if we went one by one here about where people are and what power they have, you'll be shocked how powerful you really are. Because you don't have to go and exercise power elsewhere where you don't have influence. You know, there was a lady who just said now, if you're in a communication field, he gave me a challenge. I can't delegate that to somebody else. I'm in that field. But that also comes with its own challenges if you are accessing your agency, because often people hide behind organization, but when you stand out alone, you could be targeted. And that's unfortunately the type of country we live in. Two examples, a couple of months ago, ESCOM decided, after it has been given 230 billion rand by Parliament as a bailout, that they are going to go on tender for 100 and whatever million, or I don't know what millions it was, 15 million or some ridiculous amount, and ask the public to design its logo, or rather ask for an agent. So they were going to spend 50 million rand to design a logo. This is a company that was failing to give us electricity. They want to spend money instead of improving their systems on developing a logo. I said to my lawyer, please write them a letter of intimidation. I didn't call a meeting with anybody. I just told my lawyer, write to them and say, you are going to stop that. That's wasteful. We're going to court to stop you. Now, I was lucky because a friend of mine was appointed the CEO after 2 weeks, and I phoned him and said, hey, I'm suing you because you can't spend that money to develop a logo, which you can ask school children to develop for you. They'll probably give you a candle as a logo because you're not giving them electricity. But now, obviously, it was reported that Tabane is suing ESCOM, but when ESCOM backed down, that was not reported by anyone. Because people don't like agency. They say, wow, who's this guy? What does he think he is and whatever. When Maspisa Ngakula was appointed speaker, a friend of mine called Lukana Mguna and I wrote a letter to the caucus of the ANC, not to the speaker, or at that point the deputy speaker, or the speaker had already been moved to cabinet, and said, this is not a good thing. Why are you doing this? This person has a cloud hanging over her head. And we got criticized by the media saying, are these guys politicians or are they journalists? I said, no, we're neither. We're neither journalists nor politicians. We are citizens. And I can go on and on. There are things that are happening at universities, you know, that are scandalous, and professors are made to keep quiet there. If you look at thought leadership in the newspapers, you know, if you Google a particular university, you might find that there's only one professor who's talking there. There was a professor there at Tunisia called Professor Guto. I think she's passed away now. If you talk law, he was the only person who talks. Then there is DeForce in Cape Town. Are there no law faculties everywhere else? So in the area of thought leadership, professors, accomplished PhDs and masters, graduates are not talking. They're quiet. I don't know why. Or they need permission from who. For me, citizen action is not singular. It's not linear. It's about saying, brighten the corner where you are, brighten the corner where you can. And each of us somewhere you can influence to say, no, this thing is incorrect. And if all of us did that, then people who are doing wrong things will have nowhere to hide. You know, we're crying now about gender-based violence, for example. Big stories, 16 days of activism, we're bombarded with that. But in our own circles, we don't call our friends to order. When they beat up their wives, when they do those things, we turn a blind eye. And then we expect the Minister of Women to do what? Government cannot come into your home and say, don't beat your wife. You know? So citizens have the agency. You got to look at where you have influence and exercise that. I don't believe in Big Bang Theory and Arab Spring that all of us are going to march and things will change. We must march where we can every day, in your profession, in your church, in your street, in your youth club, whatever it is. Make a difference there, and all of us will have a better country eventually. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Wonderful. We will take this. This will be the last round now. It was Piwe Mngadi, will be followed by Dr. Tandiwe Kama, and I see Sisinsapo is back now, and then we'll take Insapo, and then after that, those will be the last ones now. Let's go for, okay, let's go to, Matlogov, over to you, Spiwe.
Thank you, Prof, for the opportunity. My question is, what is the criteria that is used to give salary increment to the president? Is there a performance review that is conducted? Because considering the fact that the economy is growing at 0% and unemployment and crime is skyrocketed. So just want to get an understanding around that. Because in our professional circles, you have to meet the target for the year, and then there's a performance review before we even speak about increment or performance bonuses. Thank you, Prof.
Listen, the performance bonuses in government, sorry to say it, but it's a routine. It's not based on performance. You know that ESCOM executives at some point were considering performance bonuses even after 15 years of load shedding. I mean, how do you even begin to fathom that? Right? So it's not a surprise that even at the presidential level, they probably just said to him, as a president, you have not had an increase since 2018. The guy's a billionaire. He doesn't need an increase on 3 million rand. In fact, he should be donating his salary to charity. Right? But we don't have that servant leadership. That's why people would, in the midst of poverty, they go and increase salaries when those salaries are already inflated, or they inflate the cabinet so that they can keep patronage. How do you our cabinet is 2 times or more than the cabinet of the most powerful country in the world. We're a cabinet of 75 people or some ridiculous 35 ministers and countless deputy ministers. So your question is a broader one that says, do these leaders have these leaders become so tone deaf that they've lost even the simple touch? Imagine imagine the goodwill that the president would have gathered if he just made a press conference and say, my officials came to me with a proposal that my salary should be increased. I said to them, no, my salary is not going to be increased. In fact, I'm not increasing the salary of any of the cabinet ministers because the cabinet is already 2 times the size of 1994 cabinet. So we have already increased the salary of everybody with blue lights and security and 2 houses in Cape Town and Joburg. It's just it's a frenzy. It's a feeding frenzy, and I think it's actually unacceptable. But it shows you, your colleague was talking about communications. There's no communication strategy in government, and that's not a surprise, because there's not been a head of GCIS for 10 years, literally. 10 full years of no leader of government communications, with a communications machinery of 3,000 or more people who go to work under the title communications and get paid millions. But if you open a newspaper, you think there's only 1 or 2 communicators in the whole of government. That there's 35 departments and 9 provinces and 200 municipalities. It's actually very, very bad, and it's a terrible reputation risk that we are facing. But again, it's a trend. The president is only one block, in a bigger tapestry of being tone deaf as a government.
Thank you. Dr. Tandiwe, over to you, sis.
Thank you so much. Prof JJ, Thank you for the insights. You know, some of the comments that I've made on the chat there, in a way, you have alluded to those. So I would love your comments just here and there in terms of, okay, let me start by saying personally, where I'm sitting, not just from your presentation, Prof, but also as a South African with what we see around us. I do feel somehow in a pessimistic way that, you know, the 30 years of democracy that we're celebrating today, even though we are counting some of the shortcomings, actually a whole lot of shortcomings that we see now in our country, for me, it's going to take us another 30 years to get out of the hole that we are in. But leave that pessimistic part of me, because as a South African, I still also hope that things will get better. Having said that, where I want your comment, Prof, is if you look at, for me, the relationship between, and it boils down to the relationship between government, the private sector, and to some extent, organized labor. For me, those are the three pillars that hold our economy. And as far as I'm concerned, perhaps can we just make a comment on how do we see that relationship either working for us and making things better, or actually the other way around, really being destructive in us trying to move forward. That's one. The last one, you also touched on the moral fiber of our leadership. Yeah, for me, yeah, it's disturbing to start with, because when you look around, and also from some of the comments that you made, Prof, can we even begin to speak about the moral fiber of our leadership, but whether it's in government or private sector or even organized labor, like I'm alluding to, it's as good as non-existent. Just your comments there, Prof. And I know I've sort of asked it in a long way, but yeah, your comments there.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think the issue of moral fiber, and I think I don't know, is Prof Majola at the beginning when he said we've come to reflect our leaders. In other words, we're getting the leaders that we deserve, right? Because where were these leaders selected from? They were selected from amongst us, right? And that's why when they do some of the bad things, we excuse them because we say, I could also falter the same way, you know, and that then the leaders take advantage of that. They don't want to believe that as leaders they are held, they must be held to a slightly higher standard than ordinary mortals who are just walking up and down. They are given trillions of rands to manage. They are given lives to secure. They are given, you know, the health system to run, and all of those things that require people to have a level head. So the issue of moral fiber is unfortunately a reflection of how our society has become. That's why I was raising the issue about the fact that the corruption starts with us in our very nuclear setup, right? Where you think there's nothing wrong if you bribe a policeman who stops you because you don't want to go to prison. And the policeman says, no, that's okay, give me your cold drink and go on your way. And then they kill people after they've bribed. Then they have an accident up front because they were let go when they were drunk, when the car was not roadworthy. Instead of being impounded, they got away by bribing somebody, and then they kill someone. And then we just move on. How many people do you know who are in prison because they were driving drunk? I don't know, and I know many people who drive drunk. I don't know any who successfully was prosecuted and was in prison, because we have created a loose arrangement around morality at a micro level. So when it happens at a macro level, we get surprised to say, how can these people steal so much money? But we still, we steal time, we steal small resources, etc. at the micro level. So when we talk about moral regeneration, it's really for all of us. It's for the whole country. because we've created a bad culture. When we got into government, the first year, the first 5 years, things were going all right until we discovered tenders. And now things started to really go very, very bad. At local municipalities, it's even worse. People get appointed exactly to go and look at what is the tender. You know, when a new government was appointed in a country that will remain nameless, those people immediately went to the institutions like universities and other, sort of parastatals and say, where are we eating? I don't know whether you know a book written by a Kenyan journalist called "It's Our Turn to Eat." So we fight now to say, let's get these people out that are corrupt, and that was the message of the elections. And now, suddenly, when it's suitable, we partner with them and we are going to eat together. So it's the turn of a new set of people to eat. It's sad, and I'm not pessimistic. That's why I was saying you are not going to solve it by passing a big law that says you shall now all be morally upright. You're going to have to look at it from the nuclear family, nuclear community, and so on. And if we fight these things, I mean, you'll be shocked if you go to a church, you find people fighting over money in church. And you know that we are in deep trouble. In church, where you think things are going to be fine, people are fighting there over power, who's on the council, who's going to spend what money in church. Forget about in politics, is obviously worse. There they kill each other. We have seen it. I mean, Mpumalanga is quiet these days, but there used to be bodies there every now and again of people killing each other for positions. Now it's crazy at the end. You are a councillor, you are a candidate to be killed. That is how our moral fiber is collapsed. And I'm not sure at what point we're going to have a dialogue around this. Mandela said RDP of the soul, but that was just a slogan. Everybody has ignored that and moved on with their lives. So sorry, I don't have an answer for that, except to say I share your sadness on the moral fiber. Doesn't exist, but we can't give up. So we'll have to try, we're looking up to people like the Archbishop Thabo Makgoba and people like that who can still try to be a voice of reason where they can. But a lot of our churches don't care. They've also been co-opted. They are VIPs at these functions, and they don't want to say a difficult word to their parishioners who are stealing on Monday. These people pray on Sunday. Monday, they're the ones stealing in municipalities. Do you think the churches tell them, "Already stop stealing"? They don't. And that's part of the problem. But in conclusion, every sector must play its role. So the civil society, the churches and what must really focus on this moral thing and get all of us to focus on that. Business must focus on how we get all of us lined up around growth, inclusive economic growth, and so on. Government must create the environment, and clamp down on corruption on their end, as much as they clamp down on corruption on the private sector. So, and then of course, individuals, right in the corner where you are, no excuse. I can tell you now, every one of you here can make a small change somewhere. And that's really, for me, that's the only hope we've got. We don't have a hope of a big bang transformation at the national level, and forget that, because as soon as the good people try to get some traction, they're out. In 5 years, the new ones come, they start from scratch. It's as if the other ones didn't do anything.
Perfect. Thank you. Last one, Tsapo, are you around now? Are you back? Over to you, sis.
Greetings, bro, and thank you so much for the opportunity. My apologies for earlier on, and greetings to your guest as well, Prof Tabane. And thank you so much, man, for this insightful discussion. So I guess I was thinking out loud when I wrote that long comment, but what I was just stating is that a lot of the times we hear about this best constitution, in the whole world, and how the ANC has very good policies. But what matrix are we using to measure that if these things are not implementable? And particularly when we look at our constitution, is it really good if it's not really translating to improving people's lives? So I think that's the question. But also, I just want to share my thoughts regarding what is happening in our political space. So my observation is that we are seeing politics as a space where people sort of run to, people that don't have any moral obligation to improving the people's lives in South Africa. We see political leaders fighting amongst themselves, fighting for maybe their egos, focusing on that without necessarily thinking about where South Africa is supposed to be in the next 10, in the next 20, in the next 30 years. And I think Prof has really also, stressed out the notion that in our small spaces, we can do something to improve in our respective spaces. But one of the things that I've also observed is that currently we don't have an idea of the type of country that we want to live in. And I look at what has led to the ANC winning, in 1994 and getting us to where we are. They had a vision, and I think that's what leadership is about. Leadership is about drawing a vision of the possibilities for the people in a particular country. And I think in that absence of us as individuals dreaming about the country that we would like to live in, we have sort of given our power to the politicians to say, we're going to follow you wherever you go. And I think the results of the election showed us that there wasn't that coordinated or organized effort to the people of South Africa to say we are buying into one sort of idea for South Africa. And we also hear people mentioning, no, but we are a non-racial country. And I don't think South Africa is non-racial. We are a multiracial country. And if we are serious about the development of South Africa, we have to use the correct language in order for us to solve some of the challenges. So I guess I just wanted to share that thought, to say we need to get in the discussions that we're having in our smaller spaces. We need to start thinking about how do we reimagine South Africa beyond what we are currently seeing. And also this notion that people can, I've seen some people that are saying they are leaving the private sector or they are leaving their profession, but I might come back in the political space, almost like the political space is reserved for the people that have bad character, if I can say it for lack of a better word. But I do think that it's like we find this next 5 years provides us with an opportunity to really think about what type of South Africa do we aspire to live in, and what is our individual roles in actually ensuring that we bring about that South Africa. So I'm going to close it there. But what I would like to understand is, when we speak about the constitution and how it's the best in the world, it's based on which metrics if it's not serving the people that it's supposed to be serving in South Africa? Thank you so much, Prof Tabane, and to you, Prof, for hosting us.
Thank you so much. That's really a good comment there. I want to talk about the Constitution. The Constitution is a framework. It's almost a what you can call a signpost. It's the question of whether we can walk that path or not. So there's nothing wrong with the Constitution. Obviously, it can be improved, and no document is perfect. But our Constitution has two basic pillars. It has what we call first generation rights, and then it has second generation rights. And this, where we fail, is on this part of second generation rights. I was talking to a few people the other day at a dinner where I was invited to make remarks about various issues that are facing the GNU, including the NHI, etc. And they were saying they've spent time to see how impractical the NHI is. So the NHI is an attempt to implement the second generation rights in the Constitution, that everyone will have access to health. They don't say anyone who is employed or anyone who's wealthy can now have a tertiary, access to tertiary health care. They're saying everyone. So can we afford it? Yes, maybe when we wrote it, did we think we can afford it? We then need to put our heads together about how we can eventually afford it. There's nothing that gets to me as a quick answer that says we can't afford something. When you look at the wastage of money at every year at municipal level, at government level, all that money, if you just look at just the last 4 years alone, more than 200 billion has been wasted. And when I say wasted, I don't mean by accident. I mean stolen by conspiracy between officials and politicians. They steal it in buckets. You know, they don't. Some of them are not even sophisticated about it anymore. You understand? They send somebody there. They say, "What is the tender? Give it to so and so, and we want half of it." You'll see. That's why you got an incomplete project. You got the Montrose. I don't know whether you've seen the project called Montrose, where people are stealing frames and doors and what, because the place has been left like a ghost town. What is supposed to be a big mega city, over which 11 billion rand was budgeted. Right? So you've got resources. This country has resources. We've got mining people who are getting away with murder. We've never cancelled even one mining license based on the fact that these people have left desolate mines. So they've made their money and they have left. They're not beneficiating. That's just a slogan. That's not happening. And I don't even see that there's any infrastructure that will make it happen anytime soon, as long as we still have the kind of minister we have there who lacks leadership in that area. Right? So there are resources, but they are not prioritized properly. So I was saying also that if you go to the Constitutional Court, and I want to do this exercise, I just need to find somebody with capacity, like a master student in law who can be interested. You will be shocked to find how many judgments on socio-economic rights are in the Constitutional Court. Judgments, the way they say, you, this department, you shall do 1, 2, 3. And those things have been ignored. You think you've seen Zuma there going to court by contempt of court. Half of these DGs who've been caught if our law was equal. But no, laws is for some, not others. I can tell you now, and there won't be less than 20 such judgments that instruct government departments to do certain things that are an instruction of the Constitution in as far as second generation rights is concerned. We've got a wonderful legal system in this country. We had a team there in Palestine, or in the International Court of Justice. Top legal minds. But none of those legal minds in this country, think too carefully about the small person. And that's part of the problem with our Constitution, or the way in which we relate to our Constitution. 35 people died in Hammanskraal because of dirty water. That was as a result of neglect, corruption, and you name it. When I hosted the mayor of Tshwane on my show, I asked her, so what killed the 35 people? And she couldn't tell me. She's been a deputy mayor for months on end. I said, no, what was what do you call it? The post-mortem. No, I've never seen it. Right? So 35 people die. It's another day in South Africa with a constitution that says we have a right to life. And none of these legal minds said, no, we're going to buy pro bono, we're going to sue the government to pay those people. If anything, if you remember the life as Dimeni, when those people died, government went to court to refuse to pay them compensation. They had to be told if they had it their way and they won their case, they will not have paid them, because it means they will not be taking responsibility and therefore not implementing what the Constitution is saying. So if we're sitting with a good thing, a good road map, but no courage to travel that road, and these examples are many, right? I don't think anybody's going to sue government for the families of kids who have died because there were no inspectors of health checking those pizza shops. Nobody's going to. I'll be very surprised if they don't do it in the Hammanskraal, where it's clear, because there was a report 3 years ago, not decades ago, 3 years ago, by the CSIR saying the water in Hammanskraal is not fit for human consumption. It's a report in black and white. So why do you need anything else to sue that government? To say, but you gave Edwin Sodi water treatment, whatever, they spent 400 million, but there's no plant. You have a report from CSR saying that this water is not fit for human consumption. You did nothing about it. So a lawyer should be able to do that and sue that state. But no, we're not going to do that because we're all too inwardly focused. We're all concerned about our own little gigs on the side. And the constitution then just remains. It's not worth the paper is written on where that is concerned, where the small person is concerned. So unfortunately, I share what you are saying, but I believe the constitution, there's nothing wrong with the constitution, but a lot wrong with ourselves failing to implement what it says and always finding excuses. Oh, no, universal healthcare, don't come and tell us that. Yeah, if you don't have money to go to hospital, just die quietly, don't bother us. So that's what I'm saying. 16% only have access to proper medical care. The rest must queue at Baragwana and hope for the best. And when they argue that to keep the system, they don't address what happens to the 70% of the other people. They say, no, build hospitals first. Yeah, fine. And then what? At the end of the day, you can build those hospitals. If people don't have universal access, you are still going to be remaining with the same problem. Right? And because of the corruption stigma that has tainted our 30 years, even a good project like this, people are saying, no, they're going to steal the money. If you centralize this fund, they're going to steal it overnight. You know, I don't blame them, but that's defeatist, because we should say, how do we secure that it's not stolen? The same way we secured that, at least that I think there was some fund during COVID, not the Zweli Mkhize's digital vibes. No, I'm talking about there was a nice civil society fund, and that you know really showed that if we work together as civil society, business, and government, something can come off it, and that's what we need to be doing. I'm sorry to run at you.
Thank you. Thanks, Prof. I think that was Solidarity Fund there during the COVID. Thank you. Can I just, I know that I said that was the last one, just to respect my brother, the Andre Young. Andre, I'd already stopped, but just to respect you, my brother, briefly there, over to you, sir.
Good evening. Thank you, Prof. Mazwi. Thank you, Prof. JJ Tabane, and all of our colleagues. Shanti. I'm greeting you from a city called Pune in India. And as I listen to you, I have one question for your insight. What do you think is required for South Africans to recognize their own dignity, to claim ownership of their dignity, and to see the dignity of other South Africans? That's it.
Thank you very much. I think that should sum up really our discussions, because there is no big bang theory that's going to save us. No, a Messiah that's going to descend from anywhere. We are going to have to dig deeper into our own selves, because human beings by their nature have a lot of agency. You know, and they always say in the brain, we only use 5% of our brain. I mean, I don't know how true that is. Right? But I think our agency, we only probably also use 1% of our agency. The rest of the time we're saying, what is government doing? What is the church going to do? What is my priest going to do? What is my therapist going to do? We're looking for answers that we believe lie elsewhere. And I think the answers lie with us, right? And once we get through that part, we'll be surprised how the collective effort will result. I mean, look at what happened in Botswana. You know, Botswana, we're seen as people who are very mute. They never say anything. They're afraid to talk politics and so. And they surprised us all. They didn't do half-hearted thing like we did here in South Africa, giving the ANC 40%. They thrashed those people who have been in power for 5 decades and gave them, I think, 3 or 4 seats. It means they obliterated them quietly because they decided to, once and for all, to just dig deeper into their agency and say we cannot be oppressed anymore. And I think South Africa will get there. I don't doubt that. If Mauritius can do it, Botswana can do it, I'm sure South Africa can also do it. So I'm not hopeless. My optimism lies with the individual agency, right? That will result in community agency, and then the nation can benefit from it eventually. But at the moment, the individual agency has been destroyed, and it's part of our legacy, where people were humiliated, they were, refused opportunities, refused, to thrive, right? And then now they began to believe that and lived in that mode, and not in a mode where they can just exercise their agency and then realize their full potential. So that's really, I don't think it's a perfect answer, but I think if we start there, half of our problems may just disappear. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much, my professor. Thank you very much, my brother JJ, for, as I said earlier on, for thought-provoking and very insightful and illuminating presentation there. You've reminded us, it's what we always say in this platform, that we are awash with leaders in South Africa, but we lack leadership. And the question is, we will lament about that until when? So I like your challenge that right in your corner where you are, do something. Don't wait and point fingers and say it must be done by who and who. Just whatever you can contribute to the influence you can do. We always say leadership is about influence. Leadership is about start something and inspiring others to do something and move on. Otherwise, we are not going to win this battle if we are always looking for other people to do for us. So thank you so much for reminding us that as this platform that we must just wake up and stand up and do something about what is happening in our country. The question is, what kind of a country, what kind of a nation do you want to leave for our children and for our grandchildren? We are that transitional generation, a generation that experienced apartheid and a generation that experienced new order. So an old order and a new order. Now, what about our children? Do we ever think about that? That really we know where we are from and what we want to bequeath our children and our grandchildren with. So yeah, it's $1 million question, and I hope in the next few months or even when we come back, we'll have to answer it in this platform somehow to say, what are we doing? That's why even in this platform, we took a decision that we cannot just come here as academics and just talk. We have produced 3 books, Leaders in Leadership. We've got Women in Leadership. We've got Leaders Challenges in this country since 1994. Those books that we've published from this platform. We are busy with our new book that will be publishing next year, The Power of Women in Leadership. So at least someone might say, but also the books are just books. And maybe we need to come to a practical terms now in terms of influencing the debates and also to be there so that we are not just writing because the question that maybe others may not have that opportunity to read what we are writing. But other than that, thanks, my brother, for availing yourself. As I said earlier on, I know that your table is very full, just for your sacrifice that you made for us tonight. We really appreciate that. Thank you for your humility.
Thank you.
Now at least people know that you can just come and talk to other people. It's not about the JJ rant that you always see or
Absolutely.
So you can just come also and just listen to other people
Engage.
and talk to us
Absolutely.
and engage,
No, thank you.
other than just interviewing others all the
Yeah.
time. And that's a huge humility there. Thanks, my brother.
Thank you, my
And
brother.
may I thank everyone who's here tonight, especially those who have joined us for the first time. Thank you so much. As I said earlier on, we'll meet again next week, Wednesday. Please do join us. We are only left with 2 sessions now before we close next week, which is the 11th, and the other week, the 18th. So please do not miss those 2 sessions. Thank you so much. The session is adjourned now until we meet again next week, Wednesday. May God bless you, and may God bless South Africa, and may God bless Africa. Thank you very much, and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.